Hey man, thanks Jay. I was a fifth group guy, but
Oh
thank you.
shit, dude,
No,
you're
it's
just so
okay.
happy-go-lucky, man. You know how those fifth groupers are.
Nobody loves fifth group.
What's going on, folks? Welcome back to Beyond the Beret. Today, I have a fellow Green Beret on out of 10th Special Forces Group. He runs the
Fifth.
platform, the Team House Podcast. Jack Murphy, how you doing, brother?
Hey man, thanks Jay. I was a fifth group guy, but
Oh
thank you.
shit, dude,
No,
you're
it's
just so
okay.
happy-go-lucky, man. You know how those fifth groupers are.
Nobody loves fifth group.
Dude, I don't know why I thought you were a fucking 10th group, man. I'm like,
No,
oh,
no, it's okay.
Jack is happy all the time. He's not disgruntled. Like he can't be a fifth grouper. Oh shit. Well, there you go, man. Out of fifth special forces group. But before we kick it off, Jack, I just have a couple of questions I like to ask everybody at the very beginning.
Sure.
As it relates to books, the last book you read and what was it about?
The last book I read was a book called We Believe the Children, and it's about the satanic panic in the 1980s. And so it looks at, what happened there are a lot of people who are prosecuted and actually put in prison for what was termed ritualistic abuse, like ritualistic satanic abuse in daycare centers. And almost all of it proved to be nonsense. And people were actually in prison over this. And so this book examines the sort of like social history of this and where America was at that time and why this turned into like a sort of like literally a witch hunt.
Gotcha. I have to add that to my list of books to read. That's how I build my library nowadays,
Yeah, I
with
get it.
interesting books. And then this next question is also pretty interesting as far as how people answer it. If you had a time machine and can go back to any place in history and change one major event, what event would that be and why?
I don't know any one major event. It's hard to think of. I mean, I'd love to go back in time and see like Alexander the Great, some of those like things that are in ancient history that we know very little about. Um, but if you could go back and change one thing, I mean, maybe change the way World War One ended or the way World War Two ended, and that I mean that would have if World War One had ended under different circumstances, we probably wouldn't have had World War Two. And if World War Two didn't end the way it did, we wouldn't have had the Cold War. So those are two big points that, if I was to change something that might be worth looking at.
That's some pretty good answers, and I think everyone that I ask that question, it always goes back to either World War One or World War Two. So you're right around the same
Yeah.
wavelength with them. Have you ever been to Normandy? I know D-Day
No,
was just
no,
around the corner.
no, I haven't.
Yeah, that's I haven't either, man. And but just I didn't realize mainly because I wasn't on social media, until a year ago that it's a whole spectacle. Like there's
Oh yeah.
like a whole shebang built around it, and I'm like, holy shit! Like I got to make my way down there eventually. Like I always say, like if you're an American, there's a couple of places you just have to go. And I think Normandy is probably one of those places for sure.
Yeah, it's really nice what they do for the World War II veterans, bringing them over there and hosting them, every year.
Yeah. I definitely need to get down there. All right, last question for you, Jack, and then we'll jump right into this. As far as military career goes, what's your fondest moment of your time spent down at Fifth Group?
That's a tough question to answer. I mean, I think that, really what you take away from it is some of the people you work with and the relationships you have with them. Um, working very closely with the Iraqis was also one of those things that like changes my perspective, permanently on the world. Um, But I mean, I'm trying to think of like one moment that you could put your finger on. Trying to think. I mean, what comes to mind, of course, is just like the funny stories, right? Just
Yeah.
like the fun things that happen. Um, you know, here's this one short story. I'll keep very brief. I was down at Mishawaka, Indiana, at the armorer's course, doing a training, and my junior Bravo got pretty inebriated and tackled me, and he actually bit my shoulder. And I was like, "What are you crazy? What the hell are you doing?" And I have a bite mark on my shoulder, and that next day my girlfriend is flying in from Italy to visit. And I'm like, how in the world am I going to explain to her, "Oh yeah, it was my army buddy bit me on," like who would believe that? Who would ever believe? But yeah, so I mean, yeah, if you hold my feet to the fire, it's just the funny stories that yeah, you that come up.
Yeah, because hopefully you didn't get in too much trouble for that. But
She didn't notice, thank God, because I mean I don't know how there is no explaining that. There's no explaining that away. Like you could see the individual teeth marks.
yeah, it's I'm telling you, man, like the bond you make with buddies that you serve with, or even basic training and all these other
Yeah.
places, it lasts for forever. And it's not something that, unless you've been there, it's not something that, civilians could ever understand, right? It's just that, hey, this dude felt comfortable enough to bite you. It's like, dude, like you walk up to any civilian right now, drunk or not, you take a chunk out of them, you're going to jail. you
Yeah,
know?
I bring out the best in people. But no, you're right, man. And like that's the thing is that like a lot of guys, realize, like we all realize, I think, when you get out of the military and you find that the relationships you build on the civilian side are oftentimes very superficial, right? And it's just somebody who's like, it's not personal, it's just like, hey, I'm using you for business and now I no longer have a use for you. So, it's very like it's very transactional, I think is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, let's jump right into it, Jack. Why don't you go ahead and just because again, like I've followed you on the Team House podcast for a while, and I haven't seen that one podcast of you, so I don't know shit about you. So if you don't mind, jump right into your story, where you're from, upbringing, and what led you to joining the military.
Yeah, sure, man. I mean, we didn't grow up all that far apart from one another geographically, but I mean, but at the same time, it was worlds apart, right? I grew up in the suburbs of New York City, in Tarrytown, Sleepy Hollow, and joined the army pretty soon after 9/11. 9/11 was my senior year of high school, so enlisted in 2002 on a Ranger contract. Went in, made it in a 3rd Ranger Battalion and deployed with them a couple times to Afghanistan in 2004 and then Iraq in 2005. And then went to SFAS in 2006, graduated the Q course in 2007, was assigned to 5th Group. I was on a free fall team, and we deployed to Iraq in 2009. And then, or no, I'm sorry, 2008 we deployed. And then yeah, about that time I decided to leave the army in 2010. And went to college and found myself through a weird set of circumstances writing, and that kind of parlayed that into a job eventually in journalism. And so I mean I've worked as a national defense national security journalist for at least a decade at this point.
Now, is it freelancing or do you work for like an actual company?
I've worked for actual companies and freelanced, and I mean, it's in this economy, you have to have a lot of irons in the fire, right? You can't just do one thing or just like work for one company unless you're like an anchor on CNN or Fox News. Like you got to have a bunch of different endeavors going. So yeah, I stay busy.
I gotcha. As a fellow New Yorker, because so you're 1 year older than I am, then because when 9/11 happened, I was a junior in high school.
Okay.
Uh, what led you to wanting to join after 9/11?
It was it's a strange thing. I'm kind of like I mean, it's, Jay, like people from where we are in our area don't generally join the military. Um, so I'm kind of an outlier, I guess. And I wanted to join the military before 9/11. Like I've been fascinated by it as far back as I can remember. Even like old World War II movies, and some of my earliest memories are watching the Gulf War on CNN as a little kid. Um, so I always had a fascination with it. And then after 9/11, it just became super clear, like, okay, we're going to war. This is the path, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, because it's one of those things. Like I always tell people that you have to be like a different breed of individuals. Some people call it like the warrior genes. Others have other names for it, but it's like when everyone else is running away from it, there's always like those few that are like, this sounds interesting. Like, yeah, let me go do this, and they look at you like you're crazy. But like you mentioned, like growing up, like military wasn't even an option. But then just that, it's like that burning desire in you to do something
Yeah.
different, right? And then once I learned about it, I was like, oh, I can do this. I can go. And then sure enough, once I got into it, it was pretty easy for me. So now Ranger Battalion, like, what made you want to go not only the military but combat arms? Did you watch a particular movie? Did you like? How did you find out about Ranger Battalion without social media? Because nowadays you can find everything. But how did you
Uh,
find out about Ranger Battalion itself?
yeah, good question. I'm not sure where when it first came up on my radar, but I mean, I read a lot of stuff about the military. Then you're right. This was largely pre-internet, so or it was like in its infancy. So we're talking about like going to Barnes and Noble and looking at the military book section, and what did they have at that time? We're talking like 1996, 7, 8, 9. A lot of stuff about Vietnam. So I mean, I read books about LERPs in Vietnam, and I did kind of go into the military thinking that today's Rangers were going to be similar to like the 6-man LERP teams in Vietnam that like had all their kit taped down and were all like sneaky patrolling through the jungle. And actually, that is not what modern Rangers really do. So that was a misconception on my part. But I mean, at the time, the only book about contemporary Rangers was Black Hawk Down. I mean, that was really it.
Gotcha. Now you get to Ranger Battalion. How was your time there? Any issues? Did you enjoy it? And how did
I
you
mean, I,
discover SF?
I loved Ranger Battalion. I mean, we all love and hate it because we love it because of the discipline and we hate it because of the discipline. I mean, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I mean, it's an incredible organization, but it's also difficult to serve. It really is. I mean, it's a tough job. It's very regimented. Um, and so no, I mean, I learned so much there. I worked with some terrific people. No, it was not like, without setbacks and bad things that happened on occasion. And I may have gotten in trouble once or twice, but it was still it was a great experience. And I mean, I love Ranger Battalion to this day. And as you said, those relationships you make with guys, I mean, they endure. Um, but as far as like SF coming up on my radar, I think that was mostly through maybe in Ranger School and seeing some of the senior SF NCOs. There's a couple that, I crossed paths with. One of them was a first group guy, who's just like super squared away. And like I looked at that guy and the way how good he was on patrol and how he was like able to help everyone around him all the time, even me, because I was very young. I was 19 or 20 when I went to Ranger School, and I'd never been deployed. I knew nothing. I had no idea what I was doing. So I really admired this guy. And then I had a few other opportunities to meet some special forces NCOs, like shooting in the all army competition and elsewhere, and getting to pick their brain a little bit. And so this idea in my head is like, you know, I love Ranger Battalion, but do I really want to seize Lawson Airfield for the next 10 years of my life? Right. Like I feel like I had already seized Lawson Airfield at Fort Benning like 7 times. Like at a certain point, it's like, what am I going to move on to the next thing? What's like the next challenge going to look like? And it sounded like SF would be, kind of a good fit for me. So yeah, when I came back from Iraq in 2005 and pretty much went right into SFAS.
Gotcha. Before we transition to SFAS, what advice would you have for the guys that are trying to survive Ranger Bat right now? If you had any advice to give them, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is pretty straightforward. I mean, obviously the physical part of it you need to have together, and that's something that's in your control. So you should be in as good shape as you can. And there are others out there who know far more about physical fitness and functional fitness, the way that it's practiced by the Ranger Battalion than I do. You should go and research that stuff and look into it. The other thing is you really have to be, that term, drinking from a fire hose. You really have to be open and receptive and paying attention to everything that you're being told as a new guy there. And ask questions and ask your team leader, ask your squad leader to teach you things. If you're hungry for knowledge, I mean, that's the awesome thing about Ranger Battalion. Sometimes it's just it's a quote unquote senior private who's teaching the new guy how to use his nods. This is how you zero your pec, your infrared, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'd encourage people to just, engross yourself in it and learn as much as you possibly can. And, Ranger Battalion, I think, is the absolute best place that you can be as a young guy, in the military.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, SF itself, did you do any other G2 prior to selection? Did you know exactly what you were going to face, how to train for it, or did you just send it? Because again, this is 2005, you said. So internet was starting to become a thing.
Yeah. Um, no, I knew a little bit about it and I knew what the SF recruiter told me. But I wasn't given any time to train up for SFAS. I mean, I came back from Iraq. We did airfield seizures, and then I was sent down to Walter Reed for a couple weeks to be like a liaison for some of our guys who were hurt from the deployment. Um, Came back from Walter Reed and like literally the next day got on a plane to Fayetteville and started SFAS. And I won't lie. I mean, that whole experience of Iraq, tough deployment to Iraq for 3 months, and then going right into airfield seizures, then right into Walter Reed, and then going to SFAS for 3 weeks. I was done by the end of that. I was completely done.
Now, how was SFAS for you? Any issues? Take it you got selected the first time around, even though you didn't do a lot
Yeah.
of for it.
Yeah, I mean, I got selected. As you know, I mean, it's a grind.
Yeah.
And I won't lie and say that it was easy. It wasn't. I mean, it was pretty tough and it goes on for quite a while. I remember especially like team week, just being physically and mentally exhausted by that point. But like all the other guys out there, you get up and you put one foot in front of the other. And by the end, the final event, at least in the course I went through, we did a rock march, and they never tell you how long it is, but I think this one was probably 20 miles, at least 20 miles. And I remember just feeling like the Tin Man when I came walking back into Camp McCall, like every single one of my joints is like, so yeah, it was tough, but yeah, I made it.
Yeah. Because I do a lot of mentorship over here, and I like the fact that you went straight from deployment and then straight into it. Because a lot of people overthink it.
Yes.
It's like analysis paralysis, right? They train, and then they never send it, right? What advice would you have for those folks, and also any advice at all that you could think of to help guys succeed at SFAS?
Yeah, it's definitely true. There are people who overtrain for it, and can lead to injuries. If you are a motivated infantryman in Ranger Regiment or 82nd or something like that, I mean, you're probably already in good enough shape to make it. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do some training to prepare yourself for it. You don't want to like be lazy. Um, The biggest thing though, I think is and you hear this from a lot of people, is warn people against self-selecting. That when you go there, make the instructors do their job, and they will select you and decide if you're good enough or not. What guys do is the insecurity kind of nags at them. They're sitting in the barracks and they start self-selecting. They start thinking like, maybe my times aren't good enough, maybe this isn't good enough, that isn't good enough. And I saw, a lot of guys, some were combat veterans, um, self-select themselves right out of the course. So that's the mental piece of it that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. Because again, you just got to stay out of your head. That shit goes a long way.
Yeah,
Did you choose Bravo? And is it what language did you end up getting?
I chose Bravo. Yeah, that seemed natural because in Ranger Battalion, I'd been an anti-tank gunner, a sniper, and a weapon squad team leader. So I was like, okay, this makes sense to me. But then the language I wanted was Spanish, and they gave me Arabic, of course. So that was just sign of the times.
It was a blessing in disguise, man, because you'll probably have all sorts of kids in Latin America right now. So it all
And don't threaten me with a good time.
it all worked out. Any issues with the Q course at all? And again, if you can give anybody advice there, what would it be? Because the Q course is long and it's a
Yes.
grind. And I've seen a lot of people lose their ass, especially when I was an instructor down there. What advice would you give to anybody going through the Q course right now?
Wow. You're right to point out that like it's a long course. It's almost like, the special ops version of going to college that, there's an academic portion of it and there's a physical portion of it. Um, I think, you know, remaining goal oriented over that long slog is really important. And you know what I mean? Guys going downtown, getting into fights, getting drunk, and well, I have no problem telling people that I was young and immature, and I did some young and immature things. And thankfully, I didn't get caught, or I didn't get caught enough that they kicked me out of the course. But looking back on it, like I can see, like, yeah, I was a young, immature guy. And so I would definitely recommend people stay goal oriented. Their goal is to become a Green Beret, and not don't get sidetracked by a bunch of stupid shit, whether it's alcohol, women, whatever your thing is.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. Just wait till you actually get to the groups to pick up bad habits, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, new guy at fifth group, how was that? Because fifth group is a different beast, man. Like out of all the different groups, you guys are known for being like they call you guys a fifth army. You guys are very ranger ranger battalion like, right? So how was your initial
Yeah, dude.
experience there?
Yeah, yeah. Fifth group is like a ranger retirement home or something. It's almost we used to joke that that fifth group was more big army than the big army. Like our sergeant majors run around and yell at us for not wearing the right type of bootlaces. It's kind of weird. Um, but I had an interesting experience. I was assigned right to one of the ODAs in the expansion battalion and fourth battalion. So we were standing this thing up from scratch, the whole battalion, each team. When I showed up at the team, we had a tough box with 12 M4 carbines. And I mean, that was kind of the team equipment at the time. And so, whenever you have to stand up a unit or an element like that, I mean, it sucks. It's just a tough experience. And there's a number of different things that are going on simultaneously. You're trying to get everything trained up and prepared and validated and ready to deploy. Um, there's also other things going on in fifth group. And, I mean, I think my first battalion commander he either got relieved or stepped down within like 2 weeks of me being there. Over some other, some stuff he had going on in life. But I mean, it's just the trials and tribulations of fourth battalion. And I'll be very blunt with you. If you meet people who served in fourth battalion, in fifth group, they will probably tell you, more likely than not, they will tell you that is the most fucked up battalion they've ever seen in their entire Army career. That's what I've heard whenever I meet officers at these functions and stuff like that. I mean, you hear it time and time again, and it's there were really, I don't want to be like too derogatory. There were some really good motivated Green Berets on those teams. I just think structurally and institutionally, they were let down in some ways.
Yeah, which they ended up fixing that issue because the initial, thoughts behind it was, hey, we need more SF guys because we're
Yes.
fighting the wars on both of these fronts. Let's grow. So eventually, the fourth battalion turned into the specialty battalions.
Yes.
Now it's more like the TSD and all that other specialty stuff, and everybody got pushed back down to the line companies, right? So they're trying to put that genie back in the bottle, but
the
it is what
the
it is.
the plus side, the positive side about getting put on right onto a free fall team like this is that I was just going to school after school after school after school. I mean, we had nothing else to do because we were standing up the unit. So I went to all kinds of different courses, armors courses, driving courses, shooting courses, went to the free fall school, all that kind of stuff, like kind of back to back to back. And it was fun and got a lot of new experiences, learned new things. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. Free fall teams are the best. Now, having been the Ranger Battalion and also SF, what would you say is the biggest difference between those two entities?
I mean, there are some big differences. I think one of the big differences is, in Ranger Battalion, you have privates. In SF, you have all NCOs. So pros and cons. I mean, you're dealing with privates, but there's also this sort of like infantry camaraderie and mentorship that exists in Ranger Battalion that they will take you from the new guy that knows nothing up to the seasoned NCO. In SF, I mean, the term big boy rules is what you hear often. And it there what I came to realize is, you're expected to have initiative and know how to do your job and execute your job. And a lot of that is because you're on such a small team, it's only 12 guys. Nobody has time to micromanage you on deployment and look over every single thing. Like, you do have to know what your job is and be a self-starter and go out and make sure all that's squared away. And that's a great part of it. I mean, there's a ton of responsibility that's put on you. Um, but there's a lot of differences between SF and Ranger Battalion. And I mean, there are pros and cons, right? You can look at it both ways.
I tell you what, though, man, some of the best times I've had though was in Big Army as a squad leader, platoon sergeant, and just
Yeah.
mentoring. Some of the shit that privates do, you're like, God, leave. And then once they get it right, it's like you're like a dad, and you're like that proud dad,
Yes.
right? And that's one thing that 18 X-rays don't get that I don't agree with as far as the SF regiment, because I'm like, man, like it's such a integral part of being a leader, taking like a private and molding them and turning them into, some, just like my platoon sergeant, my squad leaders did for me, and same with you, right? I think everybody should get that experience. It's there's nothing else like it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
now
I agree.
you spent some time in fifth group, and then you decided to get out. What was the tipping point there that led you to actually getting out of the military?
There were a number of things that happened. I think that, but the big thing was that final deployment I did to Iraq, and it just became abundantly clear to me that the Army was not taking this war seriously. It was sort of like we were just overseas. Not that fifth group wasn't doing real work over there, and our team was. We were busy, but the military as a whole, it just seemed clear that they were just sort of marking time. Like their whole focus was really force protection. They just seemed scared shitless about avoiding a green on blue incident or something of that nature. Um, no one seemed really serious about, like, I don't know, establishing this country and getting something functional so that we could leave. And also, I mean, I also saw just the blatant lying that, all these units are amber, now they're green. We're good to go. We can pull out because then that's because a policy decision had been made by the Obama administration that we're going to withdraw from Iraq. So the army is like, they already know what the end state is. So now they're just sort of like pencil whipping the steps to get us there. Which I mean, I kind of understand why. I mean, when you know what the end state is. And so that was kind of demoralizing. And then I think also um some of the problems I alluded to with 4th Battalion back home in Garrison. And I remember coming to the conclusion like I could go into work and give 100%, or I could not come into work at all, and it would be almost the same result because nobody wants to do anything. Nothing gets changed. Nobody's like, hey, let's fix things around here. And so yeah, it's demoralizing. And I don't think you can really serve as a special operations soldier with that, idea in your mind, because like it is such an important, prominent part of being, quote unquote operator, um, that you're a self-starter, you're a motivated guy. And when you're not anymore, maybe it's time to go.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Now this is one that I used to struggle with, and I boiled it down to, I was there for the guys to my left and to my right. As it relates to Iraq, I know a lot of
Yeah, yeah.
vets still struggle with this. As a vet of the Iraq War, what are your thoughts when guys start talking about, they were there under false preferences and that they never should have been there and we lost all these soldiers, airmen, Marines for no reason? Like, what would you tell that guy? Because again, to me, it always boils down to, regardless of where I'm at, whether it's Afghanistan, we went in there due to 9/11, and in Iraq, it's always, hey, like I'm there because I got soldiers and I got
Yeah.
brothers and arms that I'm fighting for, right? So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's like kind of the question that all of us are like grappling with, right? Um, I do think that yeah, on that big picture, like you might have to take the L on that. I was like, sorry, man, like kind of we got screwed, and things did not turn out the way we wanted it to. And yeah, we went into Iraq under false pretenses, and then when we pulled out, a large portion of Iraq fell to ISIS. It was like kind of worst case scenario. But on an individual level or like a team or squad or ODA level, I think that, each veteran has to determine what their service meant to them. Like what did it mean to you personally? And that may be, yeah, the personal relationships that you have with your teammates and that you guys were like all in this together and pulled together and did the job, which is an amazing thing. Um, I feel that, and I also feel that the work I did with the Iraqis, and I hope representing America to them in a positive way, is just like on a very micro level. This is like Jack Murphy's service that I did in my little corner of the world for a brief period of time. That it meant something to me.
Yeah, yeah, I agree 100%, man. That's a good way to put it. Now, transitioning out the military, I know a lot of guys feel that void of, the military does a really good job at, you know, telling guys, hey, you can only do this really, really, really fucking well, right? Especially SF dudes. And then you get out and then you lose your identity and then depression sets in and then suicide and all that stuff.
Mm.
How did you figure out what you were meant to do? Like, what was that process like as you were transitioning out the
I stumbled through it. So I mean, I guess on one hand, I was ambitious and I was reaching to do good things. I went to an Ivy League school. I started a startup company, co-founded a startup company. I was writing books, but I was also married and I was a new father. And this is only with hindsight, I realized that I was doing something at the time. And what I was doing was I was introducing such a high level of stress into my life to try to mimic that like adrenaline rush that you get in the military. Like I'd like think nothing of working like 18, 19 hours a day. And in my mind, that was just like normal. That's what you do, right? There's not a squad leader to tell you to, hey, take a knee, drink some water, eat an MRE, you know? And I realized over time I was like creating, no one did it to me. I did it to myself, that I was creating this stressful life environment to try to mimic the high octane world that we experienced in the military. And it took me a long, long time to come out of that, honestly. Even after I realized it, it took me a long time to get to, where I am today, where I can take a weekend off and just go around, with my girlfriend and go to like jazz clubs and like just be a normal person. It took me a long time to get there.
Yeah, I agree. But you got there. That's the most important uh,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
point of
absolutely,
this.
man. And we
You
should
got there. Yeah,
the message we should send to, some of the younger guys who are getting out today is there is an America out there for you. There absolutely is. Your dreams have a place in this country. You have a place in this country, and don't quit on yourself. You're definitely going to have bad days. We
yeah,
all do, but
yeah. We
yeah,
all
don't
do.
don't quit.
Yeah. Now, speaking of America itself, when it comes to the military, what advice would you have for the leaders nowadays? Because the state of the military, if you've been removed, which I know you're not, is not where it was whenever you and I joined, right? People don't want to join. Leadership sucks. Like, how do we fix this?
Yeah, I have my own rants about this. And my opinion is that people talk about a lot of different things about the military. Some people say the military has gone woke. Other people say the military is like white supremacist and it's a breeding ground for extremists. None of those things they're not really true. And there's actually studies that have shown that um if you're a military veteran, you're a little bit less likely to be an extremist than someone out of general population. So none of that stuff is really true. But I think what has taken a toll on the military is this process of corporatization. And what I mean by that is by moving and deferring leadership to put it all online and putting it on computers, to make people get quote unquote validated, to do these risk assessments, to do these requalification courses online. What I think it's done is it's taken some of the human element, the human leadership out of the military, and that we've kind of deferred that to the computer, because it's easier to capture the metrics. It briefs much better. Um, but what any soldier really needs at some point is for a stand-up leader to, sometimes call him in the office and pour him a glass of scotch and be like, hey, dude, what's going on? And I think that human element has become somewhat lost. And I think you see that reflected downstream in some of the discipline issues and other things.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it. Hopefully, everything gets turned around. Now let's talk about the team house. How did that come about as far as social media? Because, dude, I think there weren't a lot of Green Berets out there at the time, probably when you guys started. What made you start that platform, and the initial intent behind it?
So the team house hasn't been around that long, maybe 4 years at this point. Um, so to trace it all the way back, I was working for a company. I wrote a book, Murphy's Law. I was fortunate enough to be one of those guys that wrote a book, I guess. And with the advance I got from the book, I used that to rent the studio space and buy all this audio and video equipment and set up what essentially could be a podcasting studio. And I had some different business ideas in my head. Initially, it was going to be more centered around gaming, not military stuff. But I left the job I had at the time. I left. I was going through some major life changes at that time, and just decided, hey, like I'm going to start this. And my friend Dave Park, who I knew going pretty far back. Probably first met him around like 2011 or so, at a Ranger meetup in New York City. And he asked if he could get involved. He's like, "Hey, do you need any help?" And it's like, "Dude, I need all that help I can get. Come on." So that's kind of the origin of the Team House and how it got started. And I think a lot of it is sort of an outgrowth of the work I've done journalistically and some of the contacts I've made and the people I know. Inviting them on the show just as you do, Jay. I mean, to kind of tell their story.
Yeah. Now, how do you deal with backlash? This is a good one, right? Because I remember when Tungo Tungo happened, right? And you were one of the first guys
Oh yeah.
to break that video, and people were pissed, right?
Yes.
I was around it at the time because I was over third grade, and they tried to get you to take it down, but you stood your ground, and that didn't take place. And then, of course, you got all the stories or the articles as it relates to the
Yeah.
fuck ups that's taking place in SF. How do you deal with backlash, and how do you, I guess, express to people that, hey, this shit needs to fucking happen? Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have some thick skin that I've developed over the years. I would say, there's two different ways to look at, quote unquote backlash, right? Sometimes people have legitimate criticisms, and I think there have been some legitimate criticisms about the way that video was released and that it could have been done in a more appropriate way. There's a lot of different ways to drill down into that. I mean, maybe not release a video, release stills from the video and explain in text what's going on, or little clips from the video. But I mean, putting it out the way that we did, I think was needlessly harmful, particularly to the family members. And that's something that I regret it was done in that manner. But then there's a lot of criticism. It's just the way I look at it, some of the just sort of senseless backlash. Um, Honestly, I think there's a lot of people out there who are not really happy with their lives and really not happy with how things turned out for them. And they kind of express that on the internet. And why there are people who glom on to some reporter that lives in Brooklyn, and I live rent free in their minds. I have no idea. I don't really get it. I don't think I'm that interesting. Uh, but I mean, I think it's just part and parcel of the job, and what I do. And so I don't really pay it any mind.
Yeah, it's something that I'm learning to do too. Is like, you know what? The internet is done wonders, but then it's also done
Yeah.
us harm by giving individuals a way to yell at the computer and not really face the backlash of getting punched in the face, right? Like, because that's how we
Yeah,
grew
yeah,
up
yeah.
in Brooklyn. Like, you got something to say, like you say to my face, or don't say it at all. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
I have going to these like special forces reunions, these different SOF events, going to SOF week, SHOT Show, whatever it is. I mean, I've been going to these things for years and years, and I've never once had someone just come up to me and said, "Jack, listen, man, I understand, but I disagree with what you're doing here for X, Y, and Z reasons." I've never had that happen even once. And I would really respect somebody who just comes up and has something to say, and not to, this, I'm not trying to be a tough guy or anything. Just tell me, and I'll listen to what you have to say, and we talk about it. But I've never had that happen even once.
Yeah, and coming from that community, like that's what we value. That's how we were raised up, right? Like, hey, if you have an issue with a teammate or anybody else within that company, like you talk it out. Like, hey man, like this is X, Y, and Z. This is my feeling about it, and then you guys hash it out, right? Because that's how I grew up. And when I'm on social media now and I'm reading the comments, and I'm like, for starters, we're special forces operators, so my skin is a tad bit thicker than that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. Well, and
Um,
I also have to concede, like, so I've been, like I said, I've been in this world for 10, 12 years at this point, and
mhm,
I have definitely been in the past sucked into the so-called vet bro drama.
yeah.
I have, in the past probably been a part of the problem. And so I've had to do some growing up as well, and develop that thick skin, try to be a little bit more adult. than I may have been in the past, where I was a little more temperamental.
And that goes a long way, right? It's what's the word I'm looking for? Just knowing that you have an issue and that you need to grow up, right? Just awareness, right? Self-awareness,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and realizing that, hey, I need to, grow up a little bit, or I need to do X, Y, and Z. That goes a long way, because even as I'm in this space now for about a year or 2 years now, I'm still learning as I go, as far as, hey, politics, relationship, and like, what I mean? Maybe some of the stuff that you should stay away from, right? Religion, politics, and relationship. Maybe stay away from those three, right? Because you live and you learn, right? You make your mistakes, and that's how you get better. That's one thing that I'm starting to learn also. So as it relates to the future, Jack, what's next for you, man?
Well, I mean, I've been really hard at work on this news outlet that I started with Sean Naylor, who is also a longtime national security journalist, writing mostly news about special operations, about the intelligence community. So that outlet is called The High Side, if people want to go look for it. And that's I really see, I think my future in doing that and doing the Team House. Those are, two businesses that, I'm owner or co-owner of, and really hope to, do that full time, those two things at some point.
Gotcha, gotcha. Before we end this, Jack, if you can change anything about your service, you getting out and where you're at now, would you have changed anything? And if so, what would it be?
Well, I mean, of course, in hindsight, there are a few things you'd want to tweak. Not in the big picture. I mean, I'm really happy that I joined the army and that I served in these two great units with great people, and that and when I left, I left it was the right time for me. And I don't regret that either. There are definitely things along the way. Some of the things I spoke to about my difficulties transitioning. You don't know what you don't know. I wish I had been a little bit more self-aware. And I think I could have made my life a little less difficult on myself. Um, and the thing, from my military service is, and I wrote about this in a couple chapters in my book. In 2004, I was involved in a friendly fire incident in Afghanistan that was, I mean, thankfully, no one was killed in that incident. But I mean, if you go through and read in the book, I mean, there's definitely, in hindsight, things that I wish I had known, things that I wish I had done differently. And we could have had a different outcome, I think.
Yeah.
But
And
I mean, what goes hand in hand with that, is you can't change the past. You can't relitigate it in your mind every single day. And at a certain point, you got to let it go.
gotcha. And it's called what? Murphy's Law, that
Yeah.
book? Gotcha, gotcha. Jack, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, where can they reach out to you, as far as social media?
Yeah, I mean, you find me on Twitter, Jack Murphy RGR, on Instagram. I think Jack McMurph, I think my name is on there. Um, you find the high side on Substack, or the Team House on YouTube, or iTunes, wherever you go for podcasts.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man, and sharing your story with me.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. I mean, likewise. And you're welcome on our show anytime. You just let us know.
I appreciate you, brother.